bring in Republican Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska. He's a member of the Armed Services Committee. Senator, welcome. Before we get to China and Taiwan, I want to first ask you about the Harvard resignation, the president, because you're an alumnus, and you actually wrote a piece for us recently about your visit up to the Widener Library and what you saw there, and what seemed to be some censorious environment regarding Israel. What do you make of the resignation?
Well, Happy New Year, Paul, from beautiful, snowy Alaska. And look, the resignation was, of course, the right thing to do. It took too long from my perspective. But I think Kim Strauss's point in your last segment was really the important one. This is going to take a long time to right the course of these once great universities that used to, in my view, be a source of American power and influence, and that's no longer the case. I'll give you one example. You know, unfortunately, I've been battling my alma mater for many, many years, decades, really. I joined a group after 9/11 called Advocates for Harvard ROTC, and we were pushing against the very open anti-military policies that Harvard had, completely out of step with American values the way they are today. And it took us well over a decade to get Harvard to reinstate ROTC, despite the fact that they had groups like the Spartacus Youth League, which was a communist organization, welcome on campus. They didn't allow Army, Navy, and Air Force ROTC on campus. So this is going to be a long-term battle, but it is important. And you know, I think the beginnings have just happened right now with the resignation of Claudine Gay, but there's a lot more work to do for our country.
Okay, all right, let's pivot to China and Taiwan. What did you make of Xi Jinping's New Year's resolution? Was this boilerplate, or should we take it more seriously?
Well, I think it's going to be a very troubling and dangerous period between now, the elections in Taiwan on January 13th, and importantly, you have the elections January 13th, but you don't have the inauguration until May. And so what we need to be doing is fully committed and resolved to protect Taiwan democracy and enhance deterrence in the Taiwan Strait. And you know, Paul, you and I have talked about that. We got a long way to go to make sure we have strong deterrence in that part of the world.
Well, when it comes to the Taiwanese election, it's fascinating to me because this is going to be a demonstration of Chinese democracy in action. I mean, this presidential race is maybe not as nasty as ours, but it's every bit as hard fought. I mean, you've got three contenders who could, you know, conceivably win. Is that what China really bothered by? Is seeing that actually here's a self-governing Chinese entity that could be an example on the mainland?
100%, and I think it's such an important point that we have to keep in mind. You know, this is their 8th presidential election, and this is a huge vulnerability to the premise of Xi Jinping's dictatorship, that one person ruling 1.4 billion people in perpetuity is the model for all Chinese. It's not the model for all Chinese. And I think this vulnerability, and Xi Jinping fears his own people, and he fears that people on the mainland are going to look across the Taiwan Strait and go, wait a minute, how come we can't do that? And of course, Taiwan is a great example. You're right. It's going to be a, you know, it's a close election right now. But here's something else that Beijing should be worried about. Every one of these parties, even the KMT, they're all starting to move away from any kind of accommodation policy towards Beijing. Almost 2/3 of Taiwanese in recent polling now see themselves exclusively as Taiwanese. These are all things that I think Xi Jinping realizes he's quite vulnerable.
Okay, now I know you're trying to get into the Ukraine-Israel Pacific Supplemental some real money for defense in the Pacific. What do you want to see in that legislation?
Yes. Well, look, we need a lot more weapon systems, basic weapon systems that Taiwan can use to defend itself. Harpoons, for example, ATACMS, Stingers, the asymmetrical weapon systems, many of which are effective in Ukraine, some of which are unique to Taiwan, that they need. And we need to continue to do the training. We have a joint training team right now on Taiwan. It's not talked about a lot, but it's very important. So I pushed for a significant increase to the supplemental. The Biden administration's supplemental as it related to Indo-PACOM was quite weak. We're trying to at least double or triple the amount of weapons that are sent there. But Paul, as you know, deterrence in the Taiwan Strait relies on both what the Taiwanese need to be able to defend themselves,
right?
Our ability, if called upon, is the U.S. military to help defend them. And then I always believe strong sanctions that would be triggered by a military invasion by the CCP of Taiwan is something else that could be very important in terms of overall deterrence in the Taiwan Strait.
All right, Senator Sullivan, thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate it.